Kids don't forget.
Kids don't forget.
You kids don't forget.
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 So, Jim, how are you today?
I'm good, Khalid.
I'm glad that you can make it.
I am super glad I could make it as well.
So, Jim is typically a nickname for James. Is that your real name?
Yes, my name is James Craig, and I am the second.
Okay. Has your name ever been mispronounced in the history of your life?
No, people pretty much, they get James or they get Jim. Although I get called Steve a lot.
You get called Steve a lot? How?
I don't even know. I must look like a Steve.
Did you have any nicknames growing up?
I did. I had a couple. Like, they called me Four Eyes, because I wore glasses.
Right.
But my one family nickname that I had growing up was Jimmo.
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 Okay.
And I hated that name.
Why?
Well, first of all, it's not my nickname. It's not mine, right? So my grandfather's name is James.
Okay.
He's James Craig. That's why I'm James Craig the second. My cousin's name is James, but he's James Mont. So James Mont, Jim Mo. That's where the Jimmo came from. It was my cousin's nickname. It was his name growing up. And when he got older, he didn't want to be called that anymore, so he was called Jim, just like my grandfather was called Jim. So I got called Jimmo. I inherited my cousin's nickname. And what's up with that, right? And so my mom, my sisters, everybody, my dad, everybody called me that, and I just didn't like it.
Got it.
So when I went to school, I never told anybody that was my name until, my sisters showed up and then everybody found out.
So it kind of caught on even throughout the neighborhood.
Yeah, I did officially retire a couple of years ago, though. I went to a family reunion where my cousin James Mont was there, and I made the official announcement that I'm no longer having this nickname, and no one could call me that.
So speaking of which, where are you from?
So I'm originally from Washington, D.C.
Okay.
I was born in Washington, D.C., but I grew up outside of Washington, D.C. in suburban Maryland, in Prince George's County.
Okay. So D.C. is like a hop, skip, and a jump right there.
Right across Southern Avenue, yeah. So we were a couple miles away from D.C.
So you live in Maryland, but you probably are in D.C. all the time?
Well, so I was in D.C. for a couple of things. My mom worked right on Southern Avenue, right across the line in the city itself. And my mom took us downtown all the time when we were kids to the Smithsonian because they were free.
Oh, cool. So you grew up in the museums?
Yes.
And you said your mom worked in D.C.?
She worked right on Southern Avenue, which is the D.C. line between Maryland and Washington, D.C.
Really?
Yeah.
So one side of the street is D.C.?
Yes.
And one side of the street is Maryland?
Correct. And it's like Western Avenue and is the same thing, and then Southern Avenue. So both sides of Washington, D.C., there is literally sitting on both sides of the street, but one's D.C. and the other one is Maryland.
Okay. What did she do?
She was a nurse.
Really?
Yes.
Your mom was a nurse?
My mom actually is still a nurse.
Okay.
She is a psychiatric nurse practitioner.
So anytime you were sick, you were good?
Yeah. She took good care of us.
Okay, got it. Now, you say you grew up on the Maryland side of it's called the DMV, that whole area, right? D.C., Maryland, Virginia.
I guess it's got a couple of different nicknames. I left in 1986 or 87, 86.
Okay.
I left in 86, so I don't know what they've been calling it ever since then.
Okay, got it.
But it was just like the tri-state area or like...
Oh, you guys call it the tri-state area?
Yeah, it's a tri-state area where like Maryland, D.C., and Virginia, I think like the Council of Governments has names and stuff for it. Like,
okay.
It's called the National Capital Area, or NCA.
Oh, the National Capital Area, okay. Because in like southern Jersey, southeastern Pennsylvania, and northern Delaware, that's called the tri-state area too, right?
Right.
So that's interesting. But we'll say it again. It's called the Northeast.
Yeah, well, the National Capital Area.
The National Capital Area. Okay.
Yeah.
Now you grew up on the Maryland side.
I did.
Where in Maryland?
So I grew up in a town called Oxon Hill.
Oxon Hill. Okay.
And my neighborhood was named Birchwood City.
Birchwood City. Okay.
And across Livingston Road from Birchwood City was another incorporated town actually called Forest Heights.
Forest Heights.
And that's where all my friends lived, and that's where I went to school.
Okay, so you lived in Birchwood City, but all your friends were in Forest Heights. Now, you told me that, and correct me if I'm wrong, DC is separated into 4 sections?
Correct. 4 quadrants.
4 quadrants, okay?
Northeast, northwest, southeast, and southwest.
Okay. So Oxon Hill is considered what?
It's outside of southeast Washington. It's closer to southeast, but it's not too far from southwest.
Okay.
Right.
How would you describe Birchwood City? Growing up.
Yeah, growing up. So my family moved there in 1967. And at that time, it was a suburban, what you call a bedroom community for a lot of folks that probably had government jobs. So there was a lot of folks there that worked for the federal government, folks that were a mix between white collar and blue collar. And there was a couple of different economic scales, if you will, but it wasn't very wealthy. It was more like, 3-bedroom, single-family homes.
Middle class.
Middle class, very much middle class, and in my case, a little below that. So.
Okay. Now, your friends in Forest Heights, you said that most of those houses were like, or almost all of them were duplexes?
Almost all of them were. We thought that was interesting when we were kids. We used to call them 2-family houses.
Okay.
And it would be a house with 2 front doors.
Right.
And usually a fence down the front yard that separated the 2, and then 2 different driveways. And
Okay.
then there would be 2 or 3 stories high, and each one had one family that lived in each side of the house. And there was a common wall that went down the middle. So I think they're called twins.
Okay,
It's
right.
not a row home. It's just each house has 2 separate houses in it.
So if you walked all the way around, you will walk around 2 families' homes, not
Correct.
one.
Correct. All the way around would be 2 families.
Got it. And that was interesting to you guys as a kid because of how different it was than Birchwood?
Yeah, Birchwood City didn't have any homes like that. It must have been built later. I think it was built later.
So they were all single family?
All single family
So
homes.
your specific house growing up, you could walk all the way around it? Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. And one of your boys in Forest Heights, if you walked all the way around it, it could have been like 2 of your friends' houses.
Right. Because some
Got
of the
it.
times they lived next door to each other.
Got it. Okay. Were you an only child?
No, I have 3 siblings.
3. Okay. Were you the oldest, youngest, or in the middle?
I'm the second oldest.
Okay. What is the age gap between you and the youngest?
Between me and the youngest is 2.5 years.
Okay. So if you're 10, I want you to imagine that you're 10 years old right
Okay.
now.
Right.
List out all your siblings by
Okay.
age.
Okay, so the oldest one, Kimberly, she's 11 and a half.
Okay.
I'm 10. My sister Deborah I'm 10, so she's 7 and a half, going to be 8. And then my youngest sister, Amy, is going to be 6 and a half, going on 7.
So you guys were mad close.
We were close together. My mom had 4 kids in 5.5 years. So we were very close together.
Were you all in high school at the same time? Or did Amy miss?
That's a whole nother story,
That's-
Billy. But we all went to different high schools together.
Okay,
So
got it.
we would have all been in high school at the same time. So me and my 2 younger sisters were all 1 grade apart.
Right, that's what I'm saying,
My
right.
older sister, though, was 2 grades ahead of me.
Ahead of
So,
you, okay,
Yeah, so we
okay.
weren't 1 grade apart. We were
So
2
Amy,
grades
so Amy missed out, basically.
Yeah.
So Debbie was in 9th, you were in 10th, and Kim was in 12th.
Correct.
Right. So Amy was in 8th. So when she made it to high school, Kim had graduated.
Already graduated.
Got it.
Correct.
Got it.
That's
What
correct.
was that like for you growing up in a house with all girls?
It was really good, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Being the only guy?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
How so?
Well, it's an interesting story, I think. So my dad had a very rough experience growing up. He was abused by his parents, unfortunately. And he was an only son as well. He has 2 sisters. He had 2 sisters.
What does abused by his parents mean? It could mean a lot of
It was
things.
physical abuse.
Physical.
Yeah.
Like it's just
Like bad.
dad just beating the crap out of him.
Yes. Yeah, very bad. And it's been corroborated by my family members, so it's not like a made up thing. But what that did was that scarred my dad, emotionally and whatever. And so he kind of doted on me as his only son.
Okay.
Not to the exclusion of the girls, but sometimes to the exclusion of the girls. Whereas my mom was much more even-handed about all 4 of us kids. So with my dad paying more attention to me when I was a child, I felt special and I didn't understand why I was different and why would I get treated different than the girls. But when you're a little kid, you don't really know.
Right.
You just don't know. And then as you get older, you start to look around and say, hey, how come I'm getting this and they're not getting that?
But by the time you start really noticing consciously, you still remember all the stuff that happened back then. Like, yo, this been going on my whole life.
Right.
Right.
That's right. So that part of growing up was that would be a little different as far as me and my sisters go.
Okay. So you guys like almost virtually grew up on top of each other.
We did, yeah. We lived in a 3-bedroom house, And because there were 4 kids and then 1 boy and 3 girls, I had to have my own room.
Right.
And my sister, Debbie, had her own room. And then in the basement, my dad built out bedrooms in the basement so that my oldest sister and my youngest sister could be down there.
Right.
And my oldest sister could look after my youngest sister. That's
Huh.
why they had bedrooms in the
Interesting.
basement.
So that's how your house was laid out.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. The middle girl had her own room, and the oldest and the youngest were in the basement.
Yeah.
Now that's interesting.
Yeah.
I would love to talk to them to find out how that was.
It was an interesting dynamic growing up because the oldest and the youngest had brown hair, and the middle one had blonde hair. I used to have blonde hair when I had hair, and so the two middle kids, my grandfather used to call us the Gold Dust twins because we were the 2 blondies, and then the older and younger were 2 brown hair girls, and so my oldest and youngest sister were very, very close growing up.
Okay.
Sometimes to the exclusion of my middle sister.
Okay.
So
Okay.
happens.
So, based on the conversation so far, it appears that you grew up with both parents.
yes,
Okay.
up to a point,
Okay. Well, up until when?
up until I was age 15.
Until you was 15. Okay. So before we get to that, what was your relationship like with each of them? So you can start with your mom or your dad.
So as I was explaining about my dad with him doting on me,
What's your dad's name, by the way?
my dad's name is Jack.
Jack. Shout out to Jack. Okay.
Right? He's still alive. He is a highly intelligent, self-educated person. He's never had any formal education beyond high school and trade school. So all his learning has come from books, reading books. He was an avid reader.
What was his trade?
His trade was automotive machinist. So he would literally build automotive engines from the engine block up.
Okay.
He'd get all the parts, and then he would do all the machine milling that he had to do to get the pistons to fit in the cylinders and the valves to fit in the valve guides and the heads and everything, and milling all the surfaces. And
So he knows how to build cars.
he knows how to build engines, and he can also work on cars. He's a good mechanic too.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So a mechanic works on the whole car. A machinist works on the engine.
Got it. Got it.
Right.
Interesting.
Yep.
Okay.
So back in those days, people used to rebuild their engines. So my dad did that as a trade, and
Why would somebody rebuild an engine?
because when a car got to 100,000 miles back in the old days, the engine would blow up on you. Basically, it wouldn't blow up. I mean, it would just die. It would
So
seize
you
up.
either had to buy a new car or
Or
get the engine
Get the
rebuilt.
engine rebuilt for far less than the cost of a brand new car.
Ah.
Much
So knowing how
cheaper.
to rebuild an engine was a good skill to have.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And people could afford to rebuild their engines versus trying to buy a new car.
Right.
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 So it was an economically viable option. So my relationship with my dad growing up was, again, because he kind of doted on me. I always felt special, and he did a lot of stuff with me. So because of that, I felt very close to my dad. I had him up on a pedestal. I admired him. He was my hero. He was like the guy who could fix anything, and he literally pretty much could fix anything. So if you need to make something out of tools with your hands, he could do it. And that was the thing about being a machinist, is that he could create just about anything out of metal or wood. He could make it. If it didn't exist, he would make it. He has tools that he's made that didn't exist before he made them. So I always thought that was really amazing, right? That he could make stuff. So I had a good relationship with him up until I was a teenager.
Okay. Got it. Got it.
With my mom's been consistent every day of my life since the earliest I can remember.
And what was your mom's name again?
My mom's name is Kathy.
Kathy. Shout out to Miss Kathy.
Yeah.
Kathy is 2 types of Kathys, with a K or a C.
She's a Kathy with a K.
She's a K Kathy. Okay.
She is. She is. Yep. And like I said, so she was a registered nurse all my years growing up. She graduated from nursing school in Wilmington, Delaware, not too long before I was born. And then she's been working as a nurse ever since. But like
Is that where she's from? Is she from Wilmington?
No, she was born in New York City,
Really?
and she grew up in southern rural Maryland, way down the eastern shore.
Okay. Where's your dad from, by the way?
He was born in Newark, New Jersey,
Okay.
and he actually grew up in western North Carolina,
Okay.
in the hills.
Do you know how they met?
Yes, I do know how they met.
Okay.
My dad was detained at St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Washington, D.C., which, as you know, was where John Hinckley is at the mental hospital.
Right.
He was there due to some court issues.
Okay.
And my mom was working as a nurse there on one of her rotations when she graduated from nursing school.
Ah,
That's how they
okay.
met.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I know they have an interesting story.
Yes, they do.
So your relationship with Miss Kathy.
Yeah, so my mom has been like my hero my whole entire life. She was, and she is, the most amazing person, just a loving, giving, caring person who cared for all 4 of us. And it's important to realize that when my mom was raising all 4 of us kids, my dad, even though he had a trade and often had a job, he often did not have a job.
Okay.
He would bounce around from place to place. And so he never really worked one place for very long consistently. But my mom had a husband, a mortgage, and 4 children she had to care for. So she worked steady, constant, all the time. She had to keep a roof over our head and food on the table. So that's what my mom did. She provided for us
So your mom was basically the breadwinner of the family.
in every way you can think of.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, back to your dad for a second.
Sure.
You said he was an outdoorsman.
Yes.
What does that mean, and what did you learn?
Yeah, oh, so he taught me a lot of stuff, Khalid. He was an avid outdoorsman. He loved to hunt. He liked to fish. He liked to do things outside, like, go take the 4-wheeler and go climbing up mountains, the 4-wheel drive Jeep and go up the mountains and explore things. He liked to hunt a lot. He did a lot of deer hunting when I was a kid, so he took me sometimes with him to go deer hunting. That was fun.
Okay.
But I more like being out in the woods early in the morning and just listening to the woods than I did the hunting part. I really wasn't. I wasn't that good at it because I'm nearsighted,
Okay.
so I couldn't see very well. So there was that issue.
Okay.
But he loved the outdoors, and he gave me an incredible love of the outdoors, Khalid. So I did get that from my dad.
So you guys did hunting, you did fishing.
Mm-hmm.
You've done all that.
I have.
Okay. What do you prefer?
Between the two of those, I prefer hiking and just being outside.
So you like the hiking
mountain
aspect
climbing,
of it
hiking,
better.
yeah, canoeing,
Okay.
caving. Like, I like outdoor stuff, but I've done a lot of canoeing. I've done a lot of backpacking. I've done a lot of caving. I've done a lot of other stuff that's not really hunting and fishing. It's more like just outdoors,
Okay.
mountain bike riding.
And lastly, about your dad, you said he was a competitive shooter.
Yes, he
So
was.
he did teach you how to shoot.
He did. He taught all 4 of us kids how to shoot.
Okay, really?
So he did take all 4
How
of us
early?
early. Like, I remember being about 4 years old,
Really?
maybe 5, learning how
Okay.
to shoot with my dad.
Out in the woods.
Yeah, so he'd have a 22 caliber rifle,
Mhm.
which is the smallest caliber rifle you can pretty much have.
Okay.
And he would take us out to a safe place, and we would go over all the safety rules, and then we'd set up cans or bottles and that's called plinking, where you get to shoot a target that moves when you hit it.
Okay.
That's kind of fun. And then there were paper targets, which to a kid is not as much fun because you're putting holes in paper. You don't really get the idea of having a group or anything. But we all learned how to shoot as children, and we also learned all about firearm safety at the same time. Right?
Now, your mom being a nurse, how does she feel about her kids shooting guns?
I don't know that my mom was ever supportive. Like she never came with us, as far as I know. I don't remember Mom ever being there, but she never said anything against it.
Okay.
So I don't know how my mom feels about it. I should ask her.
Now, you became a parent.
I did.
How many beautiful blessings do you have?
I have 3 beautiful children of my own, and I have 1 stepdaughter.
What are their age ranges?
So my son is 32.
Okay.
My daughter is 29.
Okay.
My youngest daughter is 26.
Okay.
And 1 month older than her is my stepdaughter, who's also 26.
So they're not that far apart in age. 6 years between the bookends.
Yeah, that's right. 3 years between each one of them, and they're all 6 years. 6
Okay.
years total. Yep.
So with that being said, they kind of grew up in the cluster the same way you grew up.
A little bit, yeah.
I'm curious, what are some similarities and differences between your parents' parenting styles? You know how your parents raised you because you were there.
Yeah.
What were some similarities and differences between your parenting style and your parents?
So my mom was a little more freer about discipline and about she was very much about education and about learning from your mistakes, for example. And she was not strict, but she was like you knew if you upset your mom because you did something crazy stupid, like okay, all right, I shouldn't do that. That's kind of how you learn that. My dad was a more strict disciplinarian, but mostly because he'd gotten frustrated and it had gone off the deep end at that point. So my dad really held back on the discipline when we were small children, probably because of his upbringing with him getting beat all the time. He didn't want to do that to us, so he did break that cycle. I want to give him credit for breaking that cycle of abuse.
Okay. Okay.
It just didn't manifest itself until much later. Right?
Okay.
So the difference in the styles then. So my parents were kind of pretty even-handed about everything, and we knew what was right and wrong. We were raised, with values and that kind of stuff. But my wife and I, my late wife and I, raised our 3 children in a probably more strict household than I was raised.
Okay.
A lot more discipline. My late wife was very much about making sure the kids did stuff the way she wanted to do them. She was a little bit controlling, and she was a little bit authoritarian, and that's That's how she was, and that's okay, right? It's all good. I think she did a phenomenal job raising the children. We had to decide when my second child was born which one of us was going to stay home and raise the kids and which one of us was going to go to work. And the way we made the decision was whoever makes the most money will keep working, and whoever has a lower salary will give up their job and stay home. And at the time, my wife was making more money than I was, which I was okay with staying home. I was a little nervous about it, but I was okay with it. But then I got a very large raise at work, and so I decided to keep working, and she stayed home with the kids. From the time my daughter was born, she was a stay-at-home mom for the next 15 years, basically.
So how long were you a stay-at-home dad?
I never really was. I mean, I got that raise before my daughter was born. We were still having that conversation.
Oh, okay.
Because the cost for daycare at that time would have been so high, it would have wiped out her whole salary. There would have been no point in her working.
Okay, got it. So I would be remiss. I know you mentioned 1967. That is when you guys moved to Oxon Hill from D.C.?
So we had lived. At the time we were living in the eastern shore of Maryland. So
Okay.
it's the southeastern part of Maryland on the Delmarva Peninsula.
Okay.
A little tiny town called Potomac City, and we moved from there to the suburbs of Washington D.C.
So in the late 60s, excuse me, in the early 70s, I would be remiss if I don't ask you these questions. You obviously grow up in a white household. You're a white family. And Washington, D.C. back then, and even still today, is heavily African American and white mixed. That is the height of the civil rights era. What was that like? What did your parents teach you? Like as all the civil rights activity was going on, what was it like outside with your friends? How did your sisters take it? Like, what was it like overall in your house? Like experiencing all that, like live in the middle of it.
In the moment, right?
Right.
While we're watching it on the news on TV, for example, we're reading about it in the newspaper.
Something that's like 10 minutes away.
Right.
Right.
So we moved there in '67, and in 1968, Martin Luther King was killed. In April 1968, D.C., along with a lot of other cities, erupted in violence. And we could see the smoke from the riots that were taking place in part of Washington, D.C. from where we lived, because D.C. is surrounded by hills, basically, and so you can kind of look down and see it. So if you go up on a high place and look toward Washington, D.C., you can see the smoke on the horizon. So I asked my mom, I'm like, what's that smoke? And she goes, oh, there's unrest in the city, and she would talk about that. I said, why is there unrest? Well, people are very mad because Dr. King was killed. And it's like, well, who's Dr. King? She's like, well, he's a civil rights leader. It's like, well, what's civil rights? And so my mom would very patiently explain to us all our questions. She'd answer every question we had about every single thing we possibly could, that we could know about, right? And so it's interesting because I think it was in '68. So he was killed in April of '68, and later on that year, they were going to have a 5-year commemoration of his 1963 speech, I Have a Dream speech, that was given on the Mall in Washington, D.C. And I'd always seen pictures of it, but I was just a baby, so I don't remember it.
Okay.
So they had this event called the Poor People's March. And they were going to have that march, and it was like, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people. And my mom took us all to that.
Really?
Yes. She put us on the bus, and she made some sandwiches and put them in the brown paper bags. And we got on the bus, and we rode downtown, and we got out, and we were there with all the people. And we got to see masses and masses of people gathering together to honor Dr. King, for one thing, and to gather together for people to speak about their economic conditions. That's why it was called the Poor People's March. It was about people who were economically disadvantaged.
Okay.
And when you're a kid growing up and you're poor yourself, you don't really know it until you see something that's different than what you know. That's when you start to know, right? So we went there, and we saw all kinds of people, every color, every size, every shape. I saw a Native American in a full Native American headdress.
Okay.
Like feathers on a bonnet, on a war bonnet, all the way down to the ground. And I could tell by looking at him that he was the real deal. He was authentic.
You had never seen that before?
I had never seen, other than a picture in a book, I had never seen a Native American. Live,
okay.
right in front of me. And our neighborhood was mixed racially, but it was mostly white.
Okay.
And so every once in a while, you'd see kids of different colors. So there was a kid who lived down the street whose family was from Puerto Rico, so he had slightly darker skin, like olive skin.
Okay.
There was a couple kids in our school that were black kids.
Okay.
And so we didn't really think much about it, to be honest with you. It wasn't like
It wasn't a racial thing between the kids ever.
Well, I wouldn't say ever. So I wouldn't say that. In the 60s and 70s in Washington, D.C., there was a lot of racial stuff between a lot of groups of kids.
Okay.
And it just wasn't, like, as an adult, you look back on it, you're like, yeah, that totally wasn't cool. But when you're a kid and you're part of this thing, you really don't know. You know,
Okay.
like, you just don't know. So there were kids from a neighborhood nearby, for example, and we were like, oh, those kids are from that neighborhood and we're from this neighborhood, that kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
It wasn't so much-
It was neighborhoodish.
It was
wasn't.
neighborhoodish. It wasn't so much color as it was like socioeconomic levels and stuff. Like kids from that neighborhood over there, you knew they didn't have any money, and we didn't have any money either, but we didn't know it. Like we felt like we had some money. You know what I
Okay,
mean? Like we
got
had a
it.
roof over our head and we had meals and stuff like that.
So you mentioned that your mom took you to the Poor People's March.
Mm-hmm.
Your mom clearly did not teach you to hate.
Clearly, she did not.
Okay. Your dad didn't go.
No.
Okay. What was your dad's stance on civil rights?
So it's a great question. I love that. It's hard for me to really know, but I'll tell you what I do know. So he grew up in rural North Carolina, in western North Carolina.
Okay.
And so that's Appalachia, right? And the folks there don't see anybody but white people for like their whole entire life.
Okay.
Because it's really poor and it's really rural. My grandfather's job, the reason my dad grew up there is because his job was to bring electricity to the region. They didn't even have electricity in their houses.
Really? Okay.
So the TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, put in some dams and dammed up some rivers and made hydroelectric plants in the 1930s. And that's when they began putting electricity into these rural homes for the first time. So people had never seen or used electricity in their entire life.
Okay.
And they'd lived there for hundreds of years. So this is like really backwater, right?
Right.
Not like a city that's been electrified since the late 1800s, right? So that was my grandfather's job. So my dad grew up in that area. So his I think, and living in Washington D.C., I don't think my dad was overtly racist. He didn't like use the N-word, and he wasn't like an out front in your face kind of a racist, but he would make disparaging remarks about people of color, and so I heard that growing up. And you always kind of ask yourself, you're like, why, right? Why would you do that? Like, what's the difference, you know? And so I think a lot of people around us would stir up racial tensions between the kids in school and the kids in the neighborhood, and you really are getting it from older people. You're not getting it from yourselves. Like, how would you as a kid even know?
Right.
Right? You wouldn't know. So I think it was a lot of just kind of hearing it from your parents, right? So my dad, I don't know how to describe him. I wouldn't say he's like out there, spewing hate, but I don't think he looked at people as being equals either.
So there's a difference between, in my opinion, being racist and being prejudiced. Right?
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
Racism is like you hate another group because of who they are.
Or you feel that the race that you are is somehow superior to other races.
Correct.
That to me is racism.
Now,
But
prejudice.
Everybody has a prejudice of one thing or another.
Right. Maybe I like tall women. You like short women. I like big girls. You like skinny girls. I like,
Exactly.
Right.
Prejudice is often a preference expressed in a strong way, perhaps, right?
Right.
Or you would avoid something because you're prejudiced against it. And prejudice is not too far. I mean, it can be associated with racism. It can be
Facts.
part of racism.
Right.
But I think that everybody has a prejudgment or a preference for something as opposed to actual systemic racism that's built into the society. That's a little different.
So with that being said, nothing was actually forced on you. You got the best of both worlds between your mother and your father, and you kind of made your own decisions.
And we had to learn, yes, and we had to learn as we went, right? So we had to have our own experiences and then learn from those experiences.
Okay. I bet you don't remember all the schools you went to growing up.
I remember every one.
All right, preschool, go.
Okay, preschool, I don't remember the name of the school, actually. That was in Potomac City, down in the Eastern Shore of Maryland.
Okay.
But I remember my kindergarten, I guess my first grade class going up, right? So I remember all that. So that was, first grade was Flintstone Elementary School.
Okay. Flintstone Elementary. And was that in Forest Heights or Birchwood City?
That was in Forest Heights.
In Forest Heights.
Yeah.
Okay. You lived in Birchwood City and you go to Flintstone in Forest Heights. Did you walk to school or did you catch the bus? How did that work?
So in my whole entire life, I never once rode the bus to school.
Ever.
Ever.
Okay.
I could have, but I never did. We'll get to that story later.
So that means you walked.
I walked until I
Okay.
drove.
How far a walk was the walk
So
from your
to-
house to Flintstone?
Right. So my neighborhood, Birchwood City, was divided into two, and the upper half of the neighborhood went to a different elementary school. They went to Valley View,
Okay.
The lower half of the neighborhood where I lived went to the elementary school over in Forest Heights, where all my friends lived. Right?
What did you guys call it? Did you guys have names for the upper half and the lower half?
No, it was all just Birchwood City, but it was like Valley View kids and Flintstone kids.
Oh, okay,
Right?
got
Like,
it, got
like,
it.
where do
got
you
it.
go to school? Oh, I go to Valley View. Oh, I go to Flintstone. That's
So
how
you instantly
knew.
know where people live.
Right. If you said what school you went to, you would know where people lived.
Okay,
Right.
got it, got it.
So it was about I'd say like about a 20-minute walk. It's hard to remember as a kid, you know, like
Right,
how far you go. But
right.
I think it's about 20 minutes if you walked, and like 10 minutes if you rode your bike.
So you could be walking one direction while there's a bunch of other kids walking the other direction to school? Like, do you cross each other?
No, because the upper half of the neighborhood would all go up to Valley View. Valley View was at the very back of the neighborhood.
Okay.
The lower half of the neighborhood would all walk down to Livingston Road. We had a crossing guard. She would cross us across Livingston Road because it had traffic on it, and then we would walk through the neighborhood of Forest Heights to get to get up to the Flintstone.
Got it, got it,
And
got it.
people always made fun of the name. I mean, everybody like Fred Flintstone, you know.
Did you ever have any problems with in Forest Hill? Was it as Forest Heights? Did you ever have any situations with the Forest Heights kids, or were you just cool with them?
I was cool with all of them, unless I got myself in trouble, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were there at Flintstone from first grade through what?
To 6.
Okay, so it went all the way to 6th grade.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, how was your Flintstone experience?
It was marvelous.
Okay.
I mean, I loved it there. I had a lot of friends. I had good teachers. I learned a lot. It was a good time. You know, the lower grades played kickball, grades 1 through 3,
Okay.
and then the upper grades 4, 5, and 6 got to play soccer at recess. We all hung out together. You know, it was a good time.
Okay. Okay. So you graduate from Flintstone and you go where?
To John Hanson Junior High School.
Okay.
So in Maryland, in those days, in that part of Maryland, you had a junior high school, which was grades 7, 8, and 9. So your first year of high school was actually in the junior high school building.
Oh, okay. Got it. Got it. And by the way, so back then you guys didn't call it middle school. It was junior high.
No, we thought middle school was a weird thing that other places and other states had.
Right. Right.
We didn't have that.
Okay. How was your junior high school experience?
My junior high school experience was also marvelous. It was a really good time for me. It was a good time for me to learn a little bit more about who I am. You have your first girlfriend. You start getting into other hobbies that are different than what your other friends might have, for example.
Like what? What were your hobbies?
Well, so like I like to read, so I still read all the time.
Okay.
I like to go outdoors and ride my bike and hang out with my friends and do all that kind of stuff. And the stuff I talked about earlier, like doing stuff with my dad. But when I was in junior high school, my 7th grade year, I signed up for something called band. Actually, I had been playing the clarinet in elementary school. I started in 4th grade in elementary school,
Okay.
and I played the clarinet. And so when I joined the band in 7th grade at junior high school, they had a much bigger symphonic band, a lot more kids. You know, it wasn't just 5 kids in a room with a teacher. It was like, you know, a whole room, and you had a whole period dedicated to it.
Okay.
And so you got to meet all these other kids who played music.
Okay.
And that was like really eye-opening to me. It's like to hear a whole symphonic band be able to play like a piece of music together. You're
Right.
like, oh, okay, this is not like 3 kids with a clarinet and a trumpet. You know what I mean? So it was different. It was good. That was a good experience.
Now, I would be remiss again if I skip over something. You had your first girlfriend in junior high?
I did.
Give her a shout out. What was her name?
Her name was Angela.
Angela. Shout out to Angela.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. You said you loved school, like period.
I did.
You love reading, you love science, you love history, you love math, you love English. Every subject.
I did.
Was there a subject you didn't like?
Gym.
Ah!
Look at me, Khalid. I'm not athletic.
Jim doesn't like gym.
Jim doesn't like Jim because Jim was nearsighted, Jim wore glasses, Jim was uncoordinated and not good at sports.
Okay.
So naturally I'm not going to like Jim.
Got it.
Yeah.
And you said you were on a wrestling team.
I was on the wrestling team 1 year in 9th grade, and our team went to the county championships.
What weight class were you?
I was 96 to 100.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Now you only wrestled for 1 year. Why? Oh, because... Wait. If you don't like sports, how did you get on the wrestling team?
One of my friends was on the team, and he's like, hey, you know, you should come out for wrestling. You might be good at it.
Okay.
Right? And so it turns out that the conditioning
Right.
to get into shape for wrestling
Is bananas.
is really good conditioning. So I was in the best
Right.
shape of my whole, junior high school life by doing all that training.
A lot of running, a lot of stairs.
Yeah, well, we actually did all of our workouts. Although unless we do running around outside, we did all of our workouts in the room. So a lot of push-ups, a lot of spin drills.
Spin
Man,
drills.
I hated spin drills. Oh. But you get in really good shape, and you learn a skill, and you learn how to contend. Right, you learn how to contend with somebody physically.
Okay.
So
So, 10th grade.
Mm-hmm.
So you graduate from John Hanson,
Right.
and 10th grade comes. In 10th grade, most kids are 15.
Correct.
So here it is about to come full circle. You said you lived with your parents up until you were 15.
Correct.
So the next question I typically ask is, did you live with either your mom or your dad?
Neither.
Neither. So did you run away from home?
So the story I tell people to make it short and easy for people to understand is I left home at 15.
You left home at 15.
People can understand that.
Right.
What literally happened, Khalid, was home left me.
What does that mean?
So what that means is that by the time I was age 15, my parents' relationship, their marriage had deteriorated.
Okay.
Outside of my purview, like I wasn't paying attention, you're a kid, you don't really know. They kept it.
You're into your own personal life.
Plus, they kept it away from us a lot
Okay.
too. There wasn't like a lot of screaming and shouting and fighting or whatever, but it got to a point where my mom said, I cannot stay here anymore. I have to go. And she gathered up the girls and she took them. And the day before she left, the girls came to me and said, hey, Mom's leaving. We're going with her. Why don't you come with us? And I thought to myself,
Wow, that happened. So
Yeah.
all three of your sisters came.
well, two of them, the two younger ones.
The two younger ones. Where do you remember where you were? Like, were you in your room, outside?
We were in the kitchen.
In the kitchen?
At the kitchen. Well, in our dining room, at the dining room table. It was
Okay.
right next to the kitchen.
Okay.
So I remember sitting there, reading a book, eating a bowl of cereal,
Right.
and my two younger sisters come up and say, hey, Mom's leaving. Why don't you come with us? And I said, it only took me a second to think about it. I said, no, I can't do that. I said, you guys go. I'm going to stay here with Dad. And I said, 'cause the reason why is I felt at that time that if I left, my dad would harm himself. It would be devastating to him if everyone left him.
Okay.
So that's why I stayed.
And your older sister was already gone.
No, she went with my mom. I was 15, she was 17, so she hadn't even graduated high school yet.
Okay. Okay. Oh, but the two younger ones came to you.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Got it. So your mom left. She goes where?
She took the girls, and for the first couple of months, they were at an undisclosed location.
Meaning you didn't even know where they were.
No,
Okay.
I knew they were safe, but I didn't know where they were.
So it's just you and your dad in the house now.
For about 2 months, yeah.
Okay. What was that like?
It was interesting at first. It was weird, obviously,
Right.
but my dad and I would like watch movies, and for some reason, I don't know, maybe my dad felt like he was going to open up about something. He actually told me about his life for the first time. Like I never really knew what had happened to him as a kid growing up, and so he told me his story.
So it was like watching one of these interviews live.
Oh man, it was brutal, Khalid.
Okay.
You don't know what happens to somebody until they tell you their experience.
Exactly.
And then suddenly you're like, I didn't know that happened to you. And I felt really bad that had happened to my dad, but it explained a lot,
Okay. Okay.
But he only could stick around for about 2 months. What happened was he was going out and he went to a nightclub and he met a woman, and then pretty early on actually, and then after 2 months or so had gone by, he basically moved in with her over in Virginia. So he left the house too. He would come home on the weekends, and then he would come home once a month, and then he just stopped coming home altogether.
Oh wow. So which means you were in the house at 15 by yourself.
Yep.
How were you paying for everything?
So my dad would pay somebody paid the mortgage.
Okay.
I don't know who paid it, but either my dad or my mom or both paid the mortgage, and they paid the utility bills. So every time the bills would come in, I would put them up on top of the piano in the living room in the same spot all the time, and he
Okay.
would come by and pick them up like once a month.
Oh, so you might not even be there, but you would come home and be like, parents got the bills.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the house got paid for, so I had a roof over my head,
Okay.
but I pretty much had to get a job.
I was about to say, what were you doing for like clothes and
Yeah,
food?
so that first year, my dad took me clothes shopping for school, for example, right? And so I had clothes for 10th grade for that year, but that was pretty much it. After that, I kind of had to get it myself, and then I had to buy my own food, and I had to cook my own food and all that kind of stuff.
With what money?
I had a job. I had to get a job. So
At 15?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because like today you can't work at 15 unless you get some type of special provision.
Yeah, back then you had to have what was called what do they call it, a worker's permit.
Okay.
Something like that. I think that's like a worker's permit. If you were between 14 and 17 or 14 and 18, you had to have a permit to have
Right.
a job. It had to be a piece of paper signed by your parents that said they understood you were working.
Okay, like today in most states, you can't, like a kid can't work until they're 16.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and you got to get working papers and.
Yeah, so back then we had a worker's permit, but I just signed his name and just got the job, and it's like, okay.
So, what high school did you go to?
So I started off going to Oxon Hill High School because all of my friends from Forest Heights were supposed to go to that school. That was their next step from John Hanson. They would all go to Oxon Hill Senior High School,
Which was the neighborhood school.
which was the neighborhood school for that part of Oxon Hill.
Okay.
Oxon Hill's pretty big, though. There was another school further away that was called Potomac Senior High School, and my neighborhood, the lower half of my neighborhood, all of Birchwood City, all of Birchwood City was designated as we would go to this Potomac Senior High School. But all the kids that were going there were either kids that I knew from the lower part of my neighborhood or all the Valley View kids that I didn't really even know that well.
Okay.
Right? So most of my friends lived in Forest Heights, and they were all going to Oxon Hill.
Got it.
So I enrolled in the U.S. Air Force Reserve Officers Training Corps, ROTC.
Okay.
ROTC, right? It's because Oxon Hill offered ROTC and Potomac didn't, I was allowed to go to Oxon Hill for the 10th grade year.
Okay, got
So
it, got it.
Cut my hair real short and put on a uniform and,
What was that Oxon Hill experience like?
Oxon Hill experience was mostly good, school-wise, but because I was on my own by then, I didn't pay too much attention to school as much anymore as I used to. Like, I used to be a straight-A student.
The discipline was going in your house.
Yeah,
So now it's like you're just basically doing what you want.
pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you still go to school every day?
Well, I went to school most of the time.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I
Okay.
mostly went to school, yeah.
Okay.
I went to school enough to pass my classes. I did skip a lot, though.
Did you work? So correction, you just said you worked where?
So when I was 15, I worked at a Hardee's, and then when I was 16, I got a job at another Hardee's nearby.
Hardee's is a restaurant.
Yeah, Hardee's like a hamburger place. It's like
Okay.
a fast food place.
Okay.
So I worked there.
What did you do?
I was a burger flipper.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I made the French fries. I made the burgers. I used to close a lot
Okay.
because when the restaurant closes, you have to clean the entire place top to bottom. You got to clean all
Right.
the grills, all the fry vats, all the floors, all the tables. Like everything has to be clean for the next day.
Right.
So if you closed, you got to work extra hours. You could make extra
Yeah.
money. So I would volunteer to close because I went to school during the day and then I would work in the afternoon and then at night. And so I'd get put on the closing schedule all the time. I'd sign up for it because it was extra money. And, restaurants, they have food.
Oh, got it.
Right.
it. So how am I going to eat when my parents are going, my family is going,
Work in a
I eat at
restaurant.
work. Right.
Yep,
Okay, now that was a cool solution to come up with.
it was.
Okay. And then by the time you get home from work, you fall asleep. And,
Yeah, you're wiped out.
okay,
At that
got
point,
it.
you're covered in grease and you're just like, ugh.
So that's how you survived that first year
Yeah.
of living basically by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What was that? That was the school outside like. What was the in your house like?
Oh, Khalid, the party started in 1977 and didn't stop until 1980.
Can you imagine a 15-year-old having a house to themselves?
Yes, I can. I do not recommend it. It's bananas.
High level, what are some of the things that were going on in your house? Wild parties?
Well, yeah. So we didn't talk about the music thing yet, but I was a musician by then, and so
You were a musician, right, right.
Mhm,
So
right.
you were playing the clarinet.
Well, I played the clarinet in junior high school, but by the time I got to the end of my junior high school year, I picked up the guitar.
Okay,
So at 14, I picked up the guitar. That's a whole other story. We can get to that one.
okay.
And so by the time I was 15 and a half, 16, I was playing guitar in a band.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
let's go. Let's do that story. How'd you pick up a guitar?
Oh, okay. So I was last chair clarinet.
Okay.
And anybody who's ever played in an orchestra or a symphonic band knows what the chair numbers mean.
Right.
First chair is you're the best of the best.
Exactly.
Last chair means you don't got a shot.
Right.
But I sat right next to the first chair saxophone,
Okay.
and that was a girl named Anna.
Okay.
And she was a good saxophone player.
Got it.
And so she and I would talk because she sat right next to me.
Right.
Right? And I'm a talker. So I'd talk to her. And one day, out of the blue, she said to me, I don't know how it got started, but she said to me, she goes, oh, I started playing my dad's guitar
Okay.
at my house, just plunking around on it. And she goes, oh, you play guitar? And I said, well, I'm trying to learn. And she goes, oh, I have a guitar at my house. You want to come over sometime? And I'm like,
Wow.
right? I know. And I'm like, a guitar? Yeah, probably clueless at 14. I'm with you, Khalid.
Right,
I know,
right,
I know
right.
what you're thinking. So after school one day, I go over to her house.
You went.
Yeah.
You took her up on her offer.
I did. We went over to her house.
Was she the only one home?
Her parents were probably there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We went
okay.
down in the basement. She had a guitar and an amplifier set up down in the basement, and probably more things down there too, or whatever. But she goes, "Here, do this." And she picked up the electric guitar and she plugged it in and she turned it on. And then she started playing the intro riff to Chicago's 25 or 6 to 4.
Okay.
And it is a very well-known guitar riff.
Facts.
It's one of the first things that like guitar players all learn besides Smoke on the Water, right?
Right,
Back in
right.
those days, right?
Okay.
So she's playing it, and I recognize it right away because, of course, I'm into the music or everything. I'm just mesmerized by her playing the guitar.
Right.
And she goes, "Here, now you do this." And she handed me the guitar. So I put it on, and she showed me where to put my fingers, and I start playing the riff, and I kind of picked it up. After a couple minutes, I kind of got it, you know? And so by the time I had that thing going, she reaches over and she picks up her saxophone, and she starts blowing that solo line at the beginning, you know,
Right.
that horn line, right? And all of a sudden, it was like magic. Like, people are playing music that you recognize. Like, the orchestra, the symphony was like, I didn't listen to symphonies.
Right.
So I didn't recognize the music. But 25 or 6 to 4, I know that song.
Right up your alley.
And here we are playing that song. And when we were done, she said, "Hey, you want to take that guitar home and practice it some more and then come back?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I told my daughter the story, Khalid, and she's like, "Dude, she liked you."
Right.
But I'm clueless, right? So I take the guitar and the amp and I take it back to my house, and my dad sees it. He's like, "What's that?" And I said, "It's a guitar that, you know, a girl from school loaned me." And he goes, "Oh, let me see it." And he played some bunch of stuff, and my dad always played guitar too.
Okay.
And he's a decent player. And so he showed me some things, and he's like, "Okay," and he showed me how to play bar chords, and he gave me a bunch of guitar lessons, like kind of on the spot.
Right.
And I just kept on going, and then by the time, this is when I was 14, and so
Okay.
that year, so it was a year before my family left, but then that year my dad also gave me his guitar that he'd had for 5 or 6 years at that point.
Okay.
So
Now, in 10th grade, you also said that you bought your own car.
I did.
So that was what money you saved up from working at Hardee's.
Yeah, so what happened was between 9th and 10th grade, I went down to the Eastern Shore where my grandparents lived.
Okay.
Because my dad couldn't leave me home in the house all summer by myself.
Okay.
I mean, you know.
Just the school year, but not the summer.
Right. Not the summer. He kind of figured out at that point, you know, things weren't going so good. So he had me go stay with my grandmother, and she got me a job, and I stayed there and worked all summer.
Where'd you work there?
I worked at Hardee's.
At Hardee's again.
Right, yep.
Okay.
And I worked at Hardee's, and I made enough money to buy an old Volkswagen.
So you bought your own first car, not your
did.
parents. You
No,
bought it.
Well, my dad built the engine for it, so it was a Volkswagen with a blown engine.
Okay.
And so the car was not drivable.
How much did you pay for it?
I paid $100 for that car.
You paid $100 for your first car.
I did.
What was it?
It was a 1967 Volkswagen Beetle.
Wow.
In lime green.
Wow. And your dad built the engine.
And my dad built the engine.
For
and
free, basically, because you're his son.
Yeah, and he and my
Okay.
cousin put it in. My cousin got him a blown engine. My dad took it to his machine shop. He rebuilt it completely and then brought it back. And it was overboard, 1,600 cc's and everything. It was nice.
Shout out to cousin George. That's who you bought it from. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, George had the car, and George was an expert mechanic.
Oh, he was.
Expert.
So your dad was a machinist, and you had a cousin who was a mechanic.
Yep.
Okay.
George had been shade tree mechanic since he was a kid, and he owned his own garage. He owned a gas station and a garage.
Okay.
And he could build anything in that garage.
Now you said that Beetle had no radio,
No.
so you had to buy the radio.
So my grandfather had a radio and TV electronics business.
Okay.
And so he had a catalog that he loaned me. He goes, "Here, pick out a stereo out of here to go put in your car."
Okay.
I picked out an 8-track tape player and some 2 big Jensen speakers to put in the back.
Right.
And so I put the speakers in the back. I built a platform behind the rear seat, and I put the 8-track tape player up under the dashboard, and I wired it up myself. And then my cousin came and looked at it, and he laughed at me.
How much was the radio? Do you remember?
It was $150.
So the actual stereo cost more than the car. Okay. So with that being said, 10th grade ends, and you do 11th grade at Oxon Hill?
It's right. So I show up. So I really didn't like ROTC.
Okay.
I didn't like taking orders. I didn't like cutting my hair short. You know, I'm trying to play in a band. I'm trying to be a rock guy. How are you going to be in a rock band with short hair, you know? Back in the 70s, yeah, everybody had long hair, right? So I didn't really like ROTC. So I decided to go to that school but not re-enroll in the program. So I showed up the first day of school at 11th grade in the assembly area.
Right.
And I said, "Oh, hey, I didn't get a schedule, but I was here last year. can you get me a schedule for this year? And the people looked at me and they looked me up and said, okay, yeah, we see you were here last year. Last year you took these classes. This year you're taking these classes. Are you taking ROTC again? I said, no, I'll take something else. So I took Italian for the 1 year.
Okay.
And so they said, okay, and they let me go. And so I was there for almost the entire 11th grade year.
Okay.
Almost.
So what happened?
So a month before my 11th grade year is going to end,
This would have been May of 11th grade.
May of 11th grade, so May 1979, I was working on my chemistry project, and I had a good chemistry teacher. She took a shine to me. She kind of like, all right, look, I'll take care of you.
Remember her name?
No, I don't.
All right.
But she was good, though. She was a good teacher.
Okay. So you're working on your project.
Working on my project, my chemistry labs. I had to get my labs done. And everybody in the school had to go to a pep rally.
Okay.
Well, pep rally sports, Khalid.
Right.
I don't like gym.
You're not a sports guy.
No.
Got it.
So I go to the vice principal and I complain about having to go to a pep rally versus being able to do my chemistry lab. I said, can I go work on my chemistry lab? My teacher said she'll open the lab and she'll supervise us. A handful of us would rather go to chemistry.
Why'd you guys even ask?
Because pep rallies were mandatory.
Okay. Okay.
You had to go.
Okay.
And
So you
the-
wanted to get permission so you guys wouldn't get caught.
Right.
Okay, got it.
Well, we used to want to go to the pep rally.
Got it.
I mean, we probably weren't going to go to the chem lab. But anyway.
High school, man.
I know, right? So the vice principal, his son's a star athlete.
Okay.
And so he says to me, he goes, well, don't you want to come out and support the teams? And I said, no. And he goes, what's your name? And like a fool, I
Tell
told
him your name.
my name, my real name.
Okay.
So he looks me up. You're not supposed to be here. So he expelled me from the school.
Because the reason why you even were allowed to go there because you were enrolled in the ROTC.
Correct.
And now that you're not in the ROTC, this is not your neighborhood school.
Correct. I'm supposed to go to the other school. We were bused to the other school.
So this is in the era of when busing was taking place.
Yes, it is.
All right. Describe that for a second.
So that's interesting, right? So Oxon Hill, at that time, was probably a majority white school.
Okay.
We had some kids who were of color. We had some African Americans or blacks. We had Asian kids. We had some Hispanic kids. Not too many. It wasn't very Hispanic in those days. But we had a number of African American kids that lived in the neighborhood. They would go there. But Potomac was about 85% black.
Okay.
Because of the area where it was. Most of the folks that lived in that area were black.
Okay.
Right? And so the one neighborhood that was mostly white that was bused to it was Birchwood City, my neighborhood. And I didn't not want to go to the school because it was black. I wanted to go to Oxon Hill because that's where my friends were. I really didn't know anybody at Potomac.
Got it.
I
So
mean-
time out.
Yeah.
I thought it was that the black kids were getting bused in the white schools to desegregate.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, it was reverse. They were busing the white kids into the black schools.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Probably to help even things out, if you think about it, right? So as a kid, you don't really know what the rationale is behind certain things.
Right.
You just know what you're told to do, and you just generally go do it.
Did the parents have a problem with this?
I think a lot of them did originally. There
It was
a
probably
lot
a lot of unrest.
There was a lot of. I remember hearing about it when my sister went to Potomac too. My older sister, Kimberly.
Okay.
So she went there for a while, and I don't know if she graduated from there or not. But she might have.
Okay.
Because that was at the point where my mom left and took her. So
Got it.
right. But I know she graduated. There was a lot. I remember hearing the parents talk about it. There were probably a lot of white parents at that point who were upset that their kids were going to go to the black school.
Right.
There was nothing wrong with Potomac as a school. It was
Okay.
a great school. They had good teachers.
It was just predominantly black.
Yeah, a lot of good kids. A lot of good kids,
Okay.
you know?
What was your experience like at Potomac?
Well,
So you did 12th grade at Potomac.
I did 1 month of 11th grade, and then,
Oh, right. So you did. Well, you learned nothing.
Well,
There's
it's
nothing
last-
you learn in June.
right, it's your last month of
Right.
school.
So you literally had to transfer to Potomac for 1 month.
Right, that's another story, right? So they kicked me out of school,
Right.
and so I wasn't going to go back.
Okay.
I was done. By the time I was in 11th grade, Khalid, I played in a professional band.
Called
We were named the Resistors.
the Resistors.
Right, we were a
Okay.
punk rock band in the late 1970s in Washington D.C. We played the Keg in Georgetown. We played the University over in Virginia. We played up in Anne Arundel County and outside of Annapolis. We played a lot of college parties. We played College Park, Maryland, where University of Maryland is.
Right.
We were on the college circuit. Right?
And you're like 16, 17.
I was 17.
You were 17. How'd you link up with these guys?
So I met them through a friend in high school at Oxon Hill. he said, "Oh, my buddy's looking for another guitarist for his band." Well, what they really were looking for was a place to rehearse.
Right.
I had a house.
It was win-win. You
It
got to
was.
hang with the other guys, the older guys, and be in the band.
Yeah.
And they needed a place to rehearse.
Yeah.
And here they got this place where they don't have to pay.
Right, and or have to turn it down,
Right.
and it can rehearse 24/7.
Wow.
And when they're done, they come back with the gig. They drop all the equipment in there, and they can just hang out and party.
I was about to say, and they're a band, so I'm quite sure it was a lot of girls over your house.
Oh yeah. And they're all in their 20s.
Right. So it was drinking.
Oh yeah.
There was girls.
There was girls.
I couldn't even imagine what else.
All kinds of other drugs and stuff. Khalid.
And other S words.
It was-
A lot of S words.
It's party central, man.
Jim, let me use your room. All right.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of that.
Yeah.
A lot of that.
Yeah, a
Right,
lot of that.
right,
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
right.
A lot of that. So that was going on right at that time, and I got kicked out of school, and I was like, all right, well, I'm done. I mean, we were making money every week.
Okay.
I mean, I wasn't making mad money, but I was
Right.
making money, and I had a job, plus I had the band.
Okay.
So why do I need to go to school?
Exactly.
So the drummer in this band,
Okay.
his name was Jerry.
Jerry.
And I looked-
Shout out to Jerry.
Shout out to Jerry, and I think Jerry was 22 or 23.
Okay.
You know, so he's old, right?
Right.
And I looked up to him,
Right.
and he looked right at me. He goes, "Jim, if you do nothing else," he goes, "you have to finish high school. You have to graduate."
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I said, "Jerry, why? Look at what we're doing here." And he goes, "Look at me." He goes, "I'm a drummer in this band." I'm like, "I know, and you're great." He goes, "I'm a welder." He goes, "I don't have any education. I'm not going to go anywhere or do anything." He goes, "If this doesn't make it, I got no shot. That's it." And I never had anybody put it in that kind of perspective before.
Okay.
He goes, "You have to graduate high school no matter what you do."
So Jerry pushed you to finish. The drummer in your band.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Isn't that crazy how, like, your peers, even though they were older, they were your peers.
Mm-hmm.
They know. Even your peers know when you're kind of out of place.
Yeah.
And they're like, don't be like us.
Right. He said, don't do that. So I go, I get in my car and I drive over to the high school and I walk in the front door and I said, "I need to register to come to school here." And they took one look at me and they said, where are your parents?"
Right.
I was like, "Oh, that's going to be a problem." So I called my dad. He's all mad.
Right.
Oh, you know, rah. So I said, "Well, look, just don't come. I just won't go to school anymore." And he's like, "Nah, I'll show up." So he shows up.
Your dad showed up for
He
you.
showed up for me for 15 minutes to walk in the door and sign the paperwork.
Right.
Back
And
out.
bounced.
And bounced. That's right. Back out.
Okay.
Didn't see him again for I don't know how long.
So you go to Potomac, 12th,
So
11th grade, 1 month of 11th grade.
Finish it up. Go to Potomac, right, in 12th, my senior year, my
Okay.
last year of school, my
Okay.
12th grade. And I had this teacher. And I'm going to say her whole name because this teacher probably saved my life. Her
Okay.
name is Debbie Santmyer.
Shout out to Miss Debbie Santmyer.
Shout out to Ms. Santmyer. I had her for 3 things. I had her for English Lit, I had her for health, and I had her for study hall.
Okay.
So I had her 3 periods, so half the day I was
Right.
with Ms. Santmyer, right? And she told me, she's like, "Look, you've got a lot of potential. Don't waste your potential."
Okay.
And I never had anybody tell me that before. And she's like, "You can do anything. Anything you want." She goes, "But if you screw this up," she goes, "you got no shot." So she made sure that I came to school every day that I needed to come to school so I could graduate. She made sure I graduated high school.
Really?
She was the one person who, like, you know, spoke that truth into my life.
More than your parents. She.
Because she was there every day. They
Right,
weren't, right?
right,
No
okay.
offense to mom or dad, they just weren't there,
Right.
you know?
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. What was going to Potomac like with, like, so it was predominantly black and now half white, or still
No.
predominantly black?
No, it was still probably 85, probably about 85% black. If I think about my classes and the folks that were in my classes and everything,
How'd you get along with the black kids?
we got along great
Okay.
because, you know, everybody had blunts. We all spoke the same language,
Right.
you know, yeah,
right.
but on the parking lot.
Oh, so you were cool. Like, you had the weed. They was like, it's a cool white boy. You cool with us.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And the guys were cool, right? They were all cool, you know, and the girls were cool. Like, everybody was friends, right?
Okay.
I don't think by the time we got to high school, like at that age, I don't think anybody cares about what color anybody is.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was like,
High school was so cliquey.
yeah.
But if there was that weed clique, nobody cares.
Or if it's where I went to school long enough to just pay attention to just the stuff I got to do and then I'm out.
Right.
I was, again, working, by the time I was in senior year in high school, I worked at a bank. I had a full-time job.
Okay.
So I worked at a bank and I had the band, right? I did a lot of stuff, I had a lot of stuff going on outside of school.
Okay, got it. So you graduate from Potomac?
Finally.
Who all showed up for graduation?
Mom and sisters showed up.
Your dad didn't come?
No,
Okay. Okay.
I don't know that he knew. I probably didn't tell him.
Okay. Didn't even want him to
I
come.
mean, I had his phone number, but you know.
But you do graduate.
I do, right.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. Now that high school is over,
Mm-hmm.
on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the worst ever and 10 being the best possible, how would you personally rate your childhood?
My childhood was a 10, Khalid.
Really?
Yeah.
What does a 10 childhood look like?
A 10 childhood looks like you live in a house with your mom and dad and your sisters for most of your upbringing.
Right.
You have 10 acres of woods behind your house that you go sledding in the wintertime when it snows. You go hiking around and exploring. You know, you go learn how to build fires in the woods and how to build tree forts with your friends. And you know, you have your first girlfriend, you know, so, you know, you have a, you know, like, you're kissing her in the woods. That's always a fun thing, right? You have a bicycle that you get to ride, so you have freedom. You can ride all over the place. You can go to the park. You play on sports teams occasionally. So I played a little bit of baseball when I was a kid. Again,
Okay.
never very good, but, you know, I had fun with it. You have a mom and a dad who have a wall full of books in the house, a literal wall full of books. It's floor to ceiling, right? And any book you want to read is right there on that bookshelf. So you could read anything you wanted, all kinds of books. So every book I could imagine. My mom took us to the library all the time when we were kids. We had all kinds of books.
Okay.
So it was just really good. And I'm very close to my sisters. I was very close with them then, and I'm very close with them now.
Do you have a worst childhood day or time period that you like to forever forget?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
In fact, you said you had 2.
Yeah.
All right, so what was the first one?
I don't remember I don't remember which
So,
ones I said. I
the-
know one.
The
But
first one was lunchtime, and
Oh,
the
right,
second one was
right.
in the woods,
Oh,
on the
right,
trail.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
So, well, thank you. So lunchtime. So my mom did the best she could, right? But my mom worked at night. She was a nurse working in the hospital at night.
Okay.
She was an ICU, CCU nurse, intensive care unit, cardiac care unit.
Okay.
So this is the worst of the worst.
Working on people's hearts.
People's hearts that are going to die. They're
Got it.
they're in intensive care,
Okay, right.
and it's the heart unit in the intensive care unit.
Got it.
Right. So, yeah, so very serious. So she'd come home and she would try to make us lunches and stuff for school, but she did the best she could. She had 4 kids, you know, eating her out of house and home. So she did the best she could with making us lunches, but for some reason, and I don't know why, lunchtime was always horrible for me. You go in this lunchroom, you're packed full of kids, and there's always some kid that wants to trade you for something and you don't got nothing to trade, right? Or there's some kid walks along and he pours his milk on your sandwich or something. It's like, it was just one of those things where I hated lunchtime.
Okay.
And I just didn't like eating with other people, and it was just that was the one bad thing about my childhood.
Now that's interesting because I've never heard anybody like say that. Like lunchtime. Normally in school, lunch is like one of the favorite things of school, and you abhorred it.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
I mean, most days it was okay, right?
Right.
But every once in a while, you have one of those days where you're just like, you know,
Like, so most of the bad stuff that happened to you in school was at lunch.
that's lunch.
And you knew it was going to happen. Like, here we go.
Yeah.
Got
yeah,
it.
right?
Got it.
So there was that. And then the incident in the woods was me and my friends were playing in the woods, just running around, you know, with sticks.
What
and,
woods
you know.
is this in?
So this is the woods behind my house. So it was about
Okay.
10 acres of woods between my house and the Washington Beltway.
Okay.
So we lived, our neighborhood backed right up on the Washington Beltway.
Oh, so if you walk all the way through, you're going to be on the highway.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
2 sets of 4 lanes, right?
Right.
Big highway, right? So so we're playing in the woods, and we see this girl coming down the trail. She was going somewhere, and we knew who she was. We knew her brothers and sisters, so we knew the family. We recognized her.
Okay.
And just being stupid kids. And we were probably
The woods are full of boys and some girl. Even though you guys know her, some girl comes.
right, and we're like 9 or 10, 11 years old. I think we were like maybe 9 or 10. Not too old, but like old enough that, you know, she's going to see a bunch of boys, you know, making noise in the woods, right? So we start just, you know, yelling things and whatever, you know, like hey or whatever. And so she takes off, right?
Okay.
I mean, because who wouldn't, right?
Right.
So she takes off running, and so, you know, like we chased her for a couple of minutes, but then we're like, okay, whatever. So she got going where she was going. So we're walking back up the trail, and we noticed that she had dropped an envelope on the ground.
Okay.
And we didn't look at it. We just picked it up and just shredded it. Just
Right.
threw all the paper up in
Because she
the
was a
air.
girl, who cares?
Right. We didn't know what it was. We had no idea.
Okay.
So we go on home, go have dinner, whatever. Regular day, no big deal. The next day, there was a knock on the door, and I look out the window, and I see her and her dad, or her mom, or her family. I recognize them.
Okay.
So I ran and hid, because I knew.
So wait, there was like 4 or 5 of you guys, and they came to your house, or they went to every house?
They probably went to the other houses, too.
Okay, okay.
I don't know. I just remember this happened. They came to my house.
Okay,
She might have recognized those other kids. She may not have. I know she knew who I was,
got it.
because one of her brothers was the same age as me.
Oh, okay, okay.
Or my sister Debbie, actually, they're the same age. So, but we all grew up together, all these kids, right? So she knew who it was. So I ran and hid, and so I hear them out there talking to my mom and dad for a while. Then they leave. Then my mom and dad come and talk to me. And I like, were you in the woods yesterday? Yes.
You're like, yes.
Did you find an envelope in the woods? Yes. Do you know what that envelope was? No.
And didn't care. Okay,
So I didn't say I didn't care, but I said I didn't know what it was.
right.
And they said, well, that envelope is an application for benefits for that family. The only way they can buy groceries and eat for a month is because these benefits help them with assistance. And if that application doesn't go through, they don't get their benefits. They don't get to eat for a month. And I was like, oh, and I realized what me and my friends had done,
Okay,
how badly we had harmed that family. Like, what are they going to do now?
right,
I
right.
mean, I don't. Maybe they could get another one. I don't know. I don't know what the story was. I know it wasn't good, right? So my parents were like, you can't do that. You can't tear up other people's stuff. You can't harass people. You can't do that. That's not how to be, right?
Okay, okay.
So that was an eye-opening thing for me to learn about the damage you could cause somebody inadvertently without even knowing.
Wow,
So
wow.
that was a bad day.
You got in big trouble for that. You were on restriction
I was on restrictions.
for a long time.
Yeah, a couple weeks.
Okay, what was restriction like in your house?
Yeah, so restriction was not good. That's punishment, right?
Right,
So restriction means you get no TV. You got to go to your room as soon as you come home from school. You can't come out
right,
except to eat dinner, and then back in your room, unless it's your turn to do the dishes. In which case you got to eat dinner, then you got to do the dishes, then you're back in your room.
right.
So no TV, no playing with your sisters. Just whatever's in your room is what you get, right?
Okay.
So,
All right, forget restriction. Do you have a favorite childhood day or time period that, if you could, you would like to go back to?
well, now, knowing what I know now, or back in the same time.
Both.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to go back to that day at Anna's house and just tell her thank you for the
Okay.
gift you gave me,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
What a magical gift to give somebody.
And you kind of still play a little smidgen of guitar now.
I'd play a little, yeah.
Give us a little riff. Give us a little riff.
All right.
Give us like 30 seconds of what you can do.
This is a shout out to Anna.
Okay, shout out to
There
Anna.
you go.
Nice.
25 or 6 to 4.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Of course.
Do you feel like there's anything in your childhood that occurred that affected your life either negatively or positively forever?
Yeah. I would say my parents splitting up affected my life both positively and negatively for the whole rest of my life.
How so?
So, if my mom hadn't left, she felt like she was in grave danger. She really felt that way. And so she felt that if she didn't leave, things were going to get worse for her and for my sisters in a way that I could not imagine. So she saved her own life by doing what she did. And she's often told me she felt very bad about leaving me behind. And I have told her over and over again, Mom, you did not leave me behind. I could have gone with you. I just chose not to. That was my choice. So what that did was, when I got married to my late wife,
Condolences.
Thank you. I married Tricia in 1988. She's the mom of my kids. And I knew when I married her that I was never going to get divorced, no matter what happened. I was going to make that relationship work no matter what I had to do to make it work. And so we were together until death did us part.
Okay. 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 That is interesting. Sorry about that.
No, it's all right, Khalid.
Okay. Quick question. You have a 32-year-old son.
I do.
If we take your 32-year-old son, everything that you know about him today, and let's say you stick your son, or let's stick your son's 15-year-old body inside yours, will he have been able to handle it?
Oh, man. My son, if you took my son's 15-year-old body and stuck him in my 15-year-old body,
Right.
he would have had the time of his life. He would have maximized everything. He would have had a whole place running like a clockwork. He would have had it all organized. He would
Like
have
Tom
been
Cruise
making
in
mad
Risky
money.
Business?
Right. He would have been, yes, he would have done the risky business thing. He would have had the whole operation up and running and people coming and going and dropping off the cash and every kind of thing. My son is very bright and very organized, and he is very driven. And so he would have done way better than me, Khalid.
Got it.
Way better.
Got it. Do you feel like your kids overall had a better childhood than you did?
So I think my kids, materially speaking,
Like
as far as
economically?
economically speaking, I think they had a much better childhood than I did because I made way more money than my folks did growing up.
Okay.
And through blessings, through being blessed and having opportunities to do that. I'm not saying that my mom didn't work hard, but nurses don't get paid a whole lot,
Right.
And so I had a good career in the business I'm in, and so I could provide materially for my kids. My kids grew up in a nicer house than what I grew up in. We actually could afford things like furniture. My mom could never buy, new furniture, like ever, right?
Okay.
So I think materially my kids grew up in a better place. I hope, I don't know for sure, but I hope and pray every day that they grew up in a good emotional place and a good spiritual place, wherever they happen to be spiritually, and that they grew up in a place that knew that they were loved every day.
Right, because it's hard to speak for other people, but this is your perception.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of perception, what is your overall perception of how your childhood affected your life? Like, who is the Jim of today? Who did you become? And do you feel like all these experiences added up to who you are today?
Yes, absolutely. I believe that every person is the sum of their experiences, good or bad, and that you have to make the most of every opportunity that comes along. So I was blessed by a number of things in my childhood. The desire to learn, the desire to educate myself, the desire to read. And so by reading all the books that I read, I kind of self-educated along with the education that I received along the way. And so it opened up my curiosity. By being outdoors with my dad and doing outdoor stuff, I'm an avid outdoorsman. By
Okay.
being a reader, I'm an avid student of all things. I like to learn. Every day I like to learn something new. My mom being a nurse and a caregiver, I've learned how to be a mentor and a coach to other people.
Okay.
And so every part of my childhood experience has helped me become the person that I am today.
With that being said, knowing everything that you know today, everything that you experience, looking back at your childhood, if you could talk to a younger Jim, a younger James, what age would he be, and what advice would you give him?
Oh. I think he would be about 10 or 11 years old, maybe 12.
Okay.
And I would tell him the same thing that everybody else has been telling me my whole life, Khalid, but if it's me talking to me, I'd maybe listen better, and I'd keep my damn mouth shut.
I know that's right. Jim, we thank you for being here.
It's been a wonderful opportunity, Khalid. Thank you.
Appreciate it.